They thought I was gone. They held a secret vote behind my back, kicked me out of the very company I built from scratch. But what they didn't know, what they never bothered to check, was that I still owned 51% of it. And the moment I read that email, I didn't get mad. I got ready. What came next? Let's just say it didn't just cost them their jobs. It ended their entire careers. I never thought it would come to this. Not after everything we'd built. The company was my brainchild. I gave it a name, a purpose, and a future. From a two-person startup working out of a cramped garage, we'd grown into a sleek multi-million-dollar tech firm with contracts in 4 countries and an office downtown that smelled like money and ambition. But power, as I've come to learn, is the most dangerous thing you can hand to someone unprepared to wield it. At first, the shift was subtle. Team meetings started happening without me. At odd hours, under the guise of informal brainstorming, I'd walk into rooms that fell silent too fast, eyes would dart, smiles too tight. My calendar, once full of collaborative sessions, began to feel empty. And when I confronted my co-founder, Ethan, he brushed it off with that same slippery charm he always used when dodging accountability. "Oh, just quick chats. Nothing worth troubling you with," he'd say, patting my shoulder like I was a retiring executive instead of the majority shareholder and CEO. I wasn't blind. I'd watched our once shared vision turn into something more selfish, more cutthroat. Ethan had always been ambitious, but lately he was acting like the company was his alone. There were whispers, staffers too afraid to say anything openly but wide-eyed when I passed, like they knew something I didn't. I asked my assistant, Rachel, a smart, loyal hire from our early days, if she'd noticed anything. She hesitated. "Just politics," she said. "People trying to position themselves. You know how it is." But I didn't. Not really, not until I got the email. It came on a Thursday night at 11:46 p.m. Subject line, Board Resolution 11.6. The body was short, clinical, almost surgical in its coldness. As per the board meeting held without your participation on November 6th, a vote was passed to remove you from the position of CEO. Attached are the minutes, effective immediately. No call, no conversation, just a PDF and silence. I sat there staring at the screen, stunned, not angry yet, not even sad. Just hollow. My heart didn't race, I didn't curse or pace or throw my phone across the room. I just felt the oxygen drain from the room as the reality set in. They thought they could do this. They thought they had the power. What they didn't realize was something so obvious, so utterly fatal to their plan, that it made me want to laugh. I owned 51% of the company, the majority, the final say. They had the audacity to believe they could stage a coup without even checking the shareholder agreement I had drafted myself. Line by line, years ago in a coffee shop with ink-stained fingers and burning eyes. But that night I said nothing. I didn't respond. Didn't even open the attached minutes. I let them sit in their illusion of victory while I planned. Because I don't start fires out of anger, but I will burn down lies with precision. They underestimated me, they always had. And now they'd made the most fatal mistake of all. They declared war without knowing I already controlled the battlefield. The next morning, I walked into the office just like any other day. My access card still worked. They hadn't gotten that far yet. The receptionist gave me that nervous smile, the kind people wear when they think they know something you don't. I returned it with a nod and headed straight to the executive suite. Ethan was in my chair, feet propped up on my desk, talking loud, laughing louder. Flanked by our CFO, Monica, and our operations head, Darren, 2 people I'd once trusted, now sitting comfortably in treachery. They didn't expect to see me. That much was clear when their faces stiffened into awkward smiles. "Morning," I said. Calm, unfazed. Ethan swung his legs off the desk, like a high schooler caught by the principal. "Oh, hey," he said, glancing at the others. "Didn't expect you in today. Figured you'd seen the resolution." "I did," I said. "Interesting read." He tried to mask it with bravado. We all agreed the company needed a different direction. Fresh energy. Nothing personal, just business. It was almost funny how convinced they were that they'd pulled it off. They thought they were in control. That was their biggest flaw, confusing position with power. I see, I said. And did anyone think to check the shareholder agreement before orchestrating this brilliant power play? A flicker of confusion crossed Ethan's face. Monica chimed in, her voice crisp and rehearsed. The board acted within its authority. The bylaws clearly state the CEO serves at the board's discretion. The board, I cut in, serves at the shareholder's discretion. And as the majority shareholder, I have the authority to dissolve and restructure the board entirely. Which, as of 8 a.m. this morning, I've done. They went silent. Ethan blinked, processing. Monica looked like she'd swallowed a mouthful of sand. You're bluffing, Darren muttered. I walked to the corner of the room and opened the small safe embedded behind the paneling. Inside was a red folder, one I'd labeled "In case of mutiny," back when I first sensed the shift in loyalty. Inside it were copies of the shareholder agreement, notarized resolutions, and a legal letter from our corporate attorney, Ms. Rena Feldman, who'd already filed the paperwork that morning to strip and replace the board with a new interim structure. One I controlled entirely. I dropped the folder on the desk in front of Ethan. Not bluffing, I said, and now you're trespassing in an office that no longer recognizes your authority. The color drained from his face. I didn't yell, didn't gloat. I simply leaned in and said, You wanted to play dirty. You forgot who taught you how the game works. It wasn't about revenge, not yet. This was about exposure, about showing them that power isn't stolen, it's earned and protected. Security was already waiting outside the conference room. I nodded once. Escort them out, peacefully. As they were led out, Ethan turned, one last act of false confidence on his lips. This isn't over. No, I said, locking eyes with him. It's just beginning. They had crossed a line, but now it was my turn to draw one and burn everything on the wrong side of it. After they were escorted out, the office didn't return to normal because it couldn't. Not after something like that. The energy was tense, uncertain. Whispers replaced laughter in the break room. Employees avoided eye contact. Some were loyal. Others were waiting to see which way the wind would blow. I didn't blame them. People fear fallout more than they fear failure. I gathered the core team, Rachel, our lead developer Martin, and 2 department heads who had stayed out of the coup. We met in the war room, a space we once used to brainstorm product launches. Now it felt like a command center. They'll be back, I said, not as board members, but as threats. Ethan won't go quietly. He'll sue, manipulate, maybe even sabotage. What do we do? Rachel asked. We do what we've always done, I replied. We build. But this time, we'd build a fortress, not just a business. First, I called Rena, my attorney. Within 24 hours, we had filed a cease and desist to all 3 ex-board members regarding unauthorized representation of the company. A formal notification to all vendors, clients, and stakeholders that leadership had transitioned, legally and lawfully. A request to freeze access to company systems for Ethan, Monica, and Darren, including email, cloud storage, project management apps, and payment platforms. Then we launched a forensic audit. Not because I suspected theft, because I knew it. If they were brazen enough to remove me while I still held majority control, they were arrogant enough to leave a trail. And it didn't take long to find it. Ethan had approved a series of executive bonuses weeks before the vote. Monica signed off on inflated vendor payments to shell companies. Darren rerouted R&D funds into consulting retainers that led back to his cousin's firm in Nevada. Altogether, nearly $820,000 had been quietly drained. They weren't just trying to take my company, they were already stealing it. I didn't react publicly, not yet. I needed leverage, not noise. While Rena prepared the financial fraud case, I turned my focus inward. I met with each department one by one. I told them the truth. No buzzwords, no spin, just facts. Yes, there was a coup attempt. No, they didn't succeed. Yes, there will be fallout. But we're still here. You're still here. And we're moving forward. Some employees left anyway. Those who had been handpicked by Ethan and his crew. Fine, let them go. I didn't need shadows. I needed soldiers. The rest stayed. And something incredible happened. Morale didn't collapse. It rose. People who had once kept their heads down started speaking up. Innovation returned. We started to feel like a team again. But beneath that unity was an undercurrent of anticipation. Because they were still out there. Ethan wasn't finished, and I knew him too well to expect a clean retreat. He was the kind of man who couldn't stand losing unless he could twist the narrative. And I was about to make sure the truth couldn't be rewritten. The next phase wouldn't happen in boardrooms. It would happen in courtrooms, in interviews, in front of regulators, banks, investors. I had the truth. The documents, the digital trails, the contracts they didn't read. They had ambition, yes, but they lacked what mattered most: discipline. And now they were about to find out what happens when you try to rob the architect of the very foundation you're standing on. 3 weeks after the boardroom betrayal, I filed the lawsuits. One against Ethan personally for breach of fiduciary duty, one against Monica for willful negligence in her role as CFO, one against Darren for embezzlement and fraudulent misrepresentation, and a fourth, a corporate suit, against all three for conspiracy to defraud the company and majority shareholder. By the time the papers were served, I had already secured statements from vendors, internal communications, and forensic audit reports that mapped every shady transaction. We had emails. We had recorded Zoom meetings. We had approval trails signed with their names. I didn't just want them out, I wanted them exposed. The media caught on fast. TechCrunch was the first to break the story. Startup war turns legal as CEO battles ex-partners over power grab. Within hours, it was trending on Twitter. The public loves a scandal, especially one that mixes tech, betrayal, and corporate revenge. I knew what Ethan would do next. He'd go on the PR offensive. And he did. 2 days after the story broke, he appeared on a business podcast, framed perfectly in his apartment, humble hoodie and all, painting himself as the visionary pushed out by greed. She just couldn't see the future, he said of me. She was too attached to the past, too afraid of innovation. I wanted to pivot. She wanted to preserve. It was a clash of philosophies, not a hostile takeover. Classic Ethan, manipulative, polished, empty. But what he didn't expect was that I had already sent my receipts to the host's producers before the interview aired. The moment he denied wrongdoing, the host interrupted. "We have documentation here showing nearly $1 million in diverted funds under your authorization. Care to comment?" His expression cracked. Just for a second. But it was enough. He stammered, deflected. The clip went viral. The headlines shifted overnight. From "Co-founder ousted by corporate greed" to "Fraud allegations shake promising tech startup." I didn't celebrate, not yet. This wasn't about ego. This was about ensuring no one ever tried this again. Monica tried to negotiate. She had her lawyer reach out, proposing a quiet settlement in exchange for dropping the suit and signing a mutual NDA. But I wasn't interested in silence. "You helped steal from this company," I told her directly when we spoke. "And you watched them try to erase me. If you want to fix this, you testify." To my surprise, she did. Whether it was guilt, fear of jail time, or just realizing Ethan wasn't the savior she thought he was, I didn't care. Her testimony gave us everything we needed. Detailed confirmation of the kickbacks, the fake vendors, the bonuses disguised as retention packages. Ethan was radioactive now. Investors pulled out of a startup he was quietly advising. One of the venture capital firms that had once chased us for a Series B sent a formal apology email to me. His LinkedIn was flooded with cold comments masked as questions. "Didn't you just get removed from your last company? What's your side of the story?" Darren, on the other hand, vanished. No public statements, no legal team responses. Rumor had it he left the country, fled to some Caribbean tax haven, hoping to outlast the storm. But the law doesn't forget. And I wasn't done. Because while the court battle was unfolding, I was rebuilding. Bigger, stronger, smarter. And soon I'd have something to announce that would not only solidify my comeback, but render their betrayal obsolete. While they were busy scrambling, dodging subpoenas, managing damage control, hiring spin doctors, I was laying the foundation of something far more powerful. You see, I never started this company for fame or ego. I started it because I saw a real gap in the industry. And even though they tried to hijack what I built, they couldn't hijack my mind, or the relationships I had nurtured over the years. My comeback wasn't about reclaiming a title, it was about redefining the battlefield. I reached out quietly to our top 3 clients, multinational corporations whose contracts made up 60% of our annual revenue. These weren't just contracts. These were partnerships, relationships I had built personally, often over late-night demos and emergency calls that had nothing to do with Ethan or the board. They listened, and when I showed them the direction I was heading, a spin-off built on the same core tech, but with a more agile model, they leaned in. "We've seen what's happening," one of them said on the call. "Let us know when you're ready. We'd rather bet on you than chaos." I didn't even have to sell them. The chaos they'd witnessed in the wake of the boardroom betrayal had already done the selling for me. By the time the lawsuits were working their way through the court, I'd launched StratusCore, a leaner, smarter, more resilient version of our original platform, with better integrations, a tighter team, and no corporate parasites at the helm. Rachel joined me, so did Martin. So did a handful of others who believed in the mission, not just the money. We didn't poach talent, we attracted it. Because when people believe in you, they'll follow, even if it means starting over. We launched quietly, no big press, no viral stunts, just performance. And the performance was undeniable. In the first quarter alone, StratusCore signed $4.8 million in new contracts, including 2 that had been on the table for my old company, now stalled due to leadership chaos. Ethan tried to claim we were stealing IP. His cease and desist came in hot, 2 weeks after our launch, accusing us of violating trade secrets. What he didn't realize was that I had documentation, dating back months before the coup, proving I had begun development independently using tech that was never implemented under the company umbrella. Our lawyers crushed the claim within days. The real blow, though, came not from the courts, but from the market. Clients began pulling out of the original company. Investors stopped responding to emails. Press coverage turned from curiosity to pity. The brand that once stood for innovation now stood for infighting, lawsuits, and fraud. The board they had tried to weaponize against me dissolved. The funding pipeline they thought they controlled dried up. Meanwhile, we were growing quickly. Our first team retreat was in a borrowed cabin outside Boulder. No suits, no titles, just a whiteboard, a fire pit, and a group of people who had something rare: trust. That weekend, I stood in front of them and said, "We don't build to get rich. We build to stay free." They nodded. They understood. Every one of them had seen what power in the wrong hands can do. And that's when I knew this wasn't just revenge. This was a resurrection. I didn't just come back to reclaim what was mine. I came back to build something they could never touch again. Absolutely. Here's section 6, the final and climactic section of your script. It took 7 months. 7 months of filings, hearings, witness testimonies, and depositions. 7 months of watching them try to wiggle out of accountability with the same smug arrogance they used when they staged that vote behind my back. But justice, like success, doesn't shout. It arrives calmly, with a signature on a judge's order. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, the verdict came in. Guilty on all counts. Ethan was found liable for breach of fiduciary duty and corporate misconduct. The court ordered him to repay $540,000 in damages personally and permanently barred him from serving as a board member in any public or private corporation for the next 5 years. Darren, who had tried to ghost the legal system, was tracked down in Belize and extradited. He pled out to avoid jail time but was forced to liquidate his assets to cover restitution. His reputation, however, wasn't salvageable. No investor would touch him again. Monica's case ended more softly. With her cooperation and confession, she was granted leniency but lost her CPA license permanently. She was done in the world of finance. But that wasn't the moment that brought me peace. It wasn't the settlements, the headlines, or even the fact that my name was legally restored as the rightful founder and CEO on every government record and corporate registry. It was the silence that followed, the kind of silence you only experience when a storm has passed and nothing remains but the clearing sky. I didn't post about the win. No press release, no speech. I didn't need the world to know I'd won. I needed them to live with it. That silence became my closure. I focused everything on Stratus Core. Within a year, we went from a small team in borrowed co-working spaces to acquiring our own office in Denver. Profitable, scalable, respected. We built not just a product, but a culture. One where trust wasn't a tagline, but a foundation. And for once, I wasn't just running a company, I was building a legacy. One morning, almost a year after the verdict, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a letter. Handwritten, sloppy penmanship. I didn't need to see the name to know it was Ethan. It read, "You were right. I couldn't see the long game. I thought I could win by cutting you out. Instead, I cut myself off from the one person who actually built something real. I've lost everything. I just wanted you to know. I get it now." I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, because I had finally reached a place where his words didn't matter anymore. That's the real win, when their noise can't reach your peace. These days, I don't look back much. Not because I've forgotten, but because I've outgrown it. I sit in a corner office with glass walls, not to look important, but to let the light in. I work alongside people who believe in what we're doing, not what we've done. And every now and then, someone asks how I stayed so calm through it all. And I just smile. Because when you own 51% of something, they can vote in secret, whisper behind your back, and forge every alliance they want. But the truth, you are always holding the pen.